Welcome back. Time for this week's Capitol Report with Pat McGuigan of CapitolBeatOK.com. And Pat, it is summer, but there's still plenty to talk about. You actually just read a political novel and you liked it. What are your thoughts?
I did. Richard Engel, The Last American President. Richard is a conservative, activist, Republican leader here in Oklahoma. And he's done a book that kind of reminds me of Alan Drury, the great fiction writer that my mother and I both valued and cherished, a Pulitzer Prize winner, by the way. Heavily political and symbolic series of novels in the 50s, 60s, 70s, on into the 80s. In this book, The Last American President is full of characters that you might think of as being just maybe a little bit too efficient in carrying out a message, but that's okay, because what seems implausible at first, the last American president, when you look at the events that we've all lived through in the last 9 months, where they're talking about the end of the Republican Party and some fundamental threats to parts of the Constitution and that kind of thing, who knows what the future will bring. You have a character, Alan Castle, who is a successful local public official, then becomes governor of Kansas, and then in a sequence of events that might seem crazy until you look at a community organizer becoming president of the United States, this fellow becomes president. And he and his wife are regarded by members of the more conservative party, which, like Drury, is never named as the Republicans. It's just really well put together. At the end, though, it brings about a storyline that fulfills that, that title. And yet it has a lot of really deep human lessons in the things that happen. And the message of this very political man, Richard Engel, that's E-N-G-L-E, is that politics isn't everything. And that would also match Alan Drury's writing.
I like that. All right, as we discussed last week, that you were a panelist at this year's Sovereignty Symposium, and one of the issues discussed was internet gaming. What's the latest news on that?
Yes, this was very interesting. It's a new frontier in Indian commerce, or at least potentially so. A fellow named Richard Grellner, who's a friend of mine who's supported my work in journalism, including the work at the City Sentinel, made the case through a sequence of events and ultimately prevailed that under the Indian Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution, the Indian Regulatory Gaming Act, the fact of an international market where you wouldn't have to include Oklahomans, and on, created a framework that's been approved by Judge David Russell here in Oklahoma, went through arbitration and was never overruled, and has not been appealed. So you could have a framework for internet gaming serving the international audience only, no Americans, functioning through one of the Oklahoma sovereign nations. So stay tuned for all that.
Wow, interesting. All right. Finally, the Initiative campaign in support of criminal justice reform took an important step in recent days. What was that?
I think I've probably gone over my time. I'll just say they opened an office in Tulsa. Tulsa has been a hotbed of criminal justice reform for a lot of different reasons, both at the grassroots and the leadership level. Chris Steele went up there and they formally opened their office this past week. I think that's a sign of the strength of the campaign with the November election approaching on those two measures.
All right, well, you can read more about these and other topics at CapitolBeatOK.com. For Pat McGuigan, I'm Alex Cameron. Have a great day.